Welcome to Breaking the Lines Pod. I'm Arland.
My name is Akeem, and this is a Premier League podcast.
All right, match week 4, man. It was an eventful match week. I actually really enjoyed this one. We started off first game of the match week, bright and early, 7:30 in the morning. Arsenal Forest was a nice watch. I enjoyed it. I was actually back in Florida this weekend, so got to watch this with the family, and it was a really nice time, and I enjoyed waking up for this one. I'll say that. It was tough to wake up for it, but um, good game. Um, 3-0 victory for Arsenal over Forest. To be honest, I thought Arsenal dominated. I didn't really, I didn't really have anything sort of negative on the performance. I thought Noni Madueke played very well. I'm sure that you'll be happy to hear that. I thought he was probably our best player throughout the game. Mosquera looked very good again in place of Saliba. I think we kind of outplayed them in every department, to be honest. Odegaard got injured early in the first half. I think it was around the 18th minute or so, and when Nwaneri came on, and I thought he looked really good too. He kind of the game flowed through him a little bit better than Odegaard did while he was on the pitch. But I mean, again, it was kind of early as far as him coming off, so I think it's kind of harsh to judge that way. Zubamendi came in with a couple goals. The first one was an absolute belter. It was a little central on the replays, but I mean, I just think that the pace and kind of coming through defenders and whatnot, the goalkeeper just didn't see it until late. And then his second goal, sort of the back post header, which you wouldn't really expect from him. I don't know how tall he is, but he doesn't seem like he's the tallest guy on the pitch. So other than that, I mean, I think it was great. Gyökeres got on the short score sheet for us, so I think those are, good signs, early days, but good signs all around. I thought we played pretty well. I know that there was some commotion when the lineup came out. There was some criticism as far as why Rice is not starting and, things like of that nature. And I honestly think part of that was I don't know that it was a tactical decision. I think it was more so of like rest, right? I think Rice is probably Arteta's, main man in that midfield next to Zubamendi. So I don't think necessarily it had anything to do with him being dropped or anything like that. I think it was more so, coming off a international break. Just give him some rest and see if you can manage his playing time. So overall, good, man. I don't know if you saw this one or not, but from an Arsenal perspective, no complaints, right? 3 points, 3 goals, clean sheet. Nothing really more that I could ask of the team.
Yeah, man, I think I agree with you. Like you said, right? I think the big talking point going into this was obviously Forest sacked their old previous manager, Nuno, and Ange was coming in. So there was a big question mark of how Ange is going to play and how's Forest going to look in their first game. But I think it was overall a good game for Arsenal. I watched it was the first game of the Premier League, like you said. It looked like for me nowadays when I watch Arsenal against most teams, it looks very controlled, or they have the game going in the way that they want it going, and then they'll figure out goal scoring and stuff as it goes. So I think for them was a good performance. Like you said, I saw Nani as well. And for him especially, I think with all the criticism coming in, it was a good performance for him to start that early. For attacking players, it's always good to get a goal or just to get that good performance feeling in early so you can settle in early and quicker. So overall, a good win. I think Forrest didn't offer much. Obviously, it's Ange first game, so I'm intrigued to see if he's adapted or if he's going to learn or anything, even though I don't think he will. But I'm still intrigued to see what he will do. But overall, like I said, most games I see from Arsenal nowadays is very controlled. And yeah, goes in the way of Arsenal. They're a very good team. You can tell they're molding the way their coaches want them to play. So yeah. Good question though, bro. My question for Arsenal is, have you guys always been doing that goal kick, or not the goal kick, I shouldn't say, or from kickoff where you play the ball back to Raya or one of your center back and you flood one side? Have you guys always been doing that, or is that something you think you adapted with PSG? Because I saw PSG doing that in the Club World Cup in the summer, and I can't tell if I've seen. I know Arsenal have played with Raya. I've seen Arsenal played with their goalkeeper outside, which obviously you can tell why. But was that
Uh,
something new, or is that something that you've always been doing?
I don't think it's new, but we haven't always done it. I think there's been times where we do that, sort of overload on one side from the kickoff, but to be honest, I don't really recall seeing it much, but I have seen it before. My personal opinions on that, I'd say, are a little bit mixed. I mean, I get the intention and whatnot, but, like everything, you can kind of see both ways, but I like it. I mean, it's something different, right? You know very well that the Premier League is constantly changing. You're having to find different ways, and I'm not saying that you're gonna score off of that type of goal kick, but it's just something different. I think it's just something to kind of make your opponent think as far as like what we should do, how we should handle it, what positioning should we be in. So I don't really have anything negative against it, but I think I've seen us do it in the past. I just don't know if we've always done it.
Okay. No, it was just a question, man, because I saw PSG, obviously, they did it and they've been doing it for a long time. And I can't remember if I've seen Arsenal. I watch a lot of Arsenal myself. So honestly, I think in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that I have seen it a little bit. I know I've seen Maria come out, so it's not something like it would be new for Arteta. I was just wondering. But like you, I could see the pros and cons to it as well. So I mean, I'm not faulting it. I was just wondering if it was something that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get it. I don't know. I mean, this team is just, it's really evolved in the last couple years. And like you said, I mean, it was a very, very controlled performance. And it seems like, we get a lot of those from Arsenal. I think at times, it can almost be like a criticism of theirs too, right? Where it's like, oh, you're killing the game or a negative, style of play or whatever. But I mean, I don't really understand that in my opinion. I think if you control the game, that's the whole point of the game, right? It's the whole point of football is to control the game and to come out victorious. And I think Arsenal have definitely learned how to do that. I think, the real test for them is can they do it over 38 games and can they manage this type of game? And Nottingham Forest is not a pushover team, right? They had a very good year last season. I think, this year, I don't know that they've started off as well, but there's always gives and takes, right? And I personally I wouldn't say worried coming into this one, but the new manager bounce back is always a thing, and I think that the first team that plays, the team that has just sacked their manager and brought in a new one is always a difficult game because number of different things from players, trying to maintain or win spots to, just fans and everything that goes into it. So I was interested to see how that played out, but like you said, I thought very controlled, not too nothing really too worrying, right? And I know, Forest, like I said, haven't had the greatest start. I mean, I think they got 3 points at home to Brentford and a draw with Crystal Palace, and they lost 3-0 at home to West Ham. So, definitely mix and match results. I don't think you can really look into it as, anything crazy for Arsenal, but same thing as the weekend before the Liverpool game, you come into the game and I know it's Leeds, your home, but just a dominating performance, and I think that you kind of have to build that home form, right? And so far, Arsenal have done that. The 2 games at home they've had this year, they've won. They've won 1 on the road and, obviously the loss at Anfield, so not a bad start to the season, I'd say. Me personally, I would've liked to see us get some sort of result at Anfield, maybe not a win per se, but, at least get a point from there. I think that I would be in a much better sort of mental state in terms of, aspirations for the season. But again, it's early days, it's 1 game. There's 38 games in the Premier League, so long way to go. But I think, definitely a good start for Arsenal so far.
Yeah, man, I have to agree. Like you said, I think it's a way for Arsenal, right? So I can't disagree. I think obviously, with every fan base, Arsenal fan base, being one of the biggest there is, and there's going to be criticism, right? So, but yeah, I can't disagree with the way Arteta is playing. Even as a Chelsea fan, I understand it. I think being as where we were in the past couple of years, you get to see kind of perspective of understanding like both sides. Like if you weren't good and challenging, then people would still have something to say. So, yeah, a good performance from Arsenal. But yeah, let's move into the next game. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Next game being what, you might think is sort of our favorite sleeper team, based off of how much we've discussed them on the pod so far. But Bournemouth at home to Brighton, 2-1 victory for Bournemouth. I didn't watch this game, but Bournemouth just don't seem like they're letting up. I mean, three wins, one loss, sort of the same start to the season as Arsenal, right? Their only loss being away to Anfield. I think that, it seems like, they got the job done. They got the 3 points. Brighton with a loss coming off that high from beating City to losing to Bournemouth. So interesting there. I think Semenyo got a goal in this one too, or a goal and an assist. So I was hyped about that. Putting up some numbers on the fantasy. I think you and I both have him in our squad. So definitely some good numbers coming from him. But yeah, I think Bournemouth just keep doing what they're doing, right? And if they keep going like this, they'll be definitely up there in the European places, I think for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. It was a Semenyo show for sure. The whole game. I mean, he got an assist, like you said, and a goal. So a good win, a good performance from Bournemouth. But I mean, not a pushover team at Brighton. Like we've always said, I think also a good team. So for Bournemouth to be winning, and when you win in amongst the teams that you're competing against, it's almost like a 6 pointer. So yeah, well deserved victory. I watched it, but they deserved the win. I think it was a good performance from Bournemouth overall. Brighton could have, on the day, I think Brighton is just like one of those teams that could play great one week and then the next week it's questionable. So I think it was one of those off performance for Brighton, but overall a good performance for Bournemouth. I watched the game myself. That's all I could judge from the game. I don't follow both teams. I follow Semenyo for the fantasy points, but that's about it.
Yeah. The next few games this weekend were sort of, I wouldn't say boring, definitely not boring, but low scoring games. Definitely not great ones for the over 1.5 total goals guys. Selhurst Park, Crystal Palace nil, Sunderland nil. I don't think that's a bad result, I'd say, for either team, given the context of what's going on for both teams so far. I think definitely good for Sunderland to get points away in the league, or a point I should say away in the league. I think that's a great sort of result for them. And I mean, they keep getting points, right? They have 7 points out of their first 4 games. I think that if you would have given that to them going to the season, they absolutely would have grabbed that, being a newly promoted side. Crystal Palace, on the contrary, is 6 out of their first 4. And having played, I mean, or I should say, not necessarily having played tough opponents. I mean, there's the Chelsea game, obviously, the draw there. And then they beat Villa sort of, out of the blue. I think they caught Villa at a great time. So I think, they've actually had I wouldn't say easy start to the season. I think they definitely had a difficult start to the season. Looking back at their results, actually, I stand corrected. So I think that they wouldn't be too upset from 6 points out of the first 4 as well. They're still sort of unbeaten. They have no losses so far. So I think that's a good thing, definitely. But sort of the same thing in the Everton Villa game, right? 0-0 at the, what was it, the Hale Dickinson Stadium? 0-0 there. I think I went into this one sort of expecting goals just because of sort of how Everton have started. And I thought that Villa might, be a little bit more venturous in terms of trying to get on the score sheet just because they hadn't scored a goal in the Premier League yet. But another 0-0 result. Worrying times at Villa Park, I'd say 4 games in. Villa with 2 points, no goals, 4 goals conceded. Definitely something to read into. I don't know if you caught these games or if you have any thoughts on them, but very interesting. To be honest, I had both of these games at over 1.5 goals, so definitely a letdown for me on that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't able to catch out any of these games, honestly. I saw that both the scores were 0-0, like you said, and as we've said, I don't think it's a bad point for Everton. I think for Villa, though, 4 games in, 2 points and 0 goals scored. So we've been saying that for the past couple weeks. You got to keep an eye out for them. For Sunderland and Crystal Palace, I agree with you. I don't think for either point. I think for Palace, maybe, with Sunderland being a newly promoted team, they can look at it in a certain way of wanting to maybe go for the win. But I think in the circumstances of what they're both find themselves, I don't think it's a bad point for either. So yeah, not much takes because I didn't watch the game myself. So all I can go from is what I've seen from Villa so far and what I've seen from the other three teams pretty much.
Yep. So piggybacking off of both of those 0-0 results, we have two identical results as well. 1-0 for the home team, Fulham at home to Leeds, and then Newcastle at home to Wolves. I don't think that either of these games were sort of, well, I don't want to say either of these games. I don't think that the Fulham game in particular, I don't think that it was necessarily, I mean, obviously a bad result for Leeds losing 1-0, but I think Fulham scored in like 90 plus 4 and it was an own goal. So, I don't think that Leeds, will be hanging their heads in disappointment in terms of performance, right? Away to Fulham, they kept them out of their net for 94 minutes. I think disappointing probably to lose a point, but performance-wise, probably encouraging, right? I didn't watch the game, so I'm kind of just, speaking off just how it looks in terms of the results. And then Newcastle Wolves. Again, I think Wolves are just I don't know what's going down there at the Molineux, but they're struggling. I mean, 0-4 to start the season, losing 1-0 to Newcastle, who, I mean, Newcastle's not a pushover, right? We both know that they're a serious team in the Champions League this year. They probably have lost their best player, but they brought in some reinforcements with Wisa and Walton Made, the German guy, and he ended up on the score sheet. So that's very good for them. I'm interested to see how they fare in the Champions League, to be honest, given sort of their mixed start to the season so far. I think their first game is against Barcelona on Wednesday, so it's going to be interesting to see how they fare there. But a good 3 points for Newcastle, I think. 1-0, but, they'll take it. I think they were the favorites going into this game regardless, so good results for Fulham and Newcastle. Get some points on the board and move on.
Yeah, man, I have to agree. Don't know what's going on at Wolves, obviously, with even worse than what's going on at Villa with the 4 games in, negative, what, 7 goal differential for them. It's very worrying times for them over there. I think losing 1-0 in the match week there is very worrying for Wolves. I know, like we said, Newcastle is obviously not an easy team, but I think Newcastle have also had their concern. And for what we've known Wolves for the past couple seasons, and not even couple seasons, however long they've been in the Premier League, they've always given a good game to whoever they play. So I think it's kind of a little bit obviously they've lost Cunha. Did they lose anybody else?
I think they did. I think they lost Fabio Silva as well, who was featured in their team last season. They had a bunch of outgoings, to be honest. I mean, looking at their transfer outgoings, it's a ton of players. Nelson Semedo, you and I both know he's been there for a while. I think a lot of players they've lost. And I don't know what they've really brought in, right? I think it's mostly sort of I don't want to say like chance players, players that are not necessarily maybe proven in you know big leagues or so. So I think for them it's definitely going to be a process. It's going to be you're scraping to get some victories, and I think definitely an early relegation contender. I think you and I would both agree on that. 0 points from 4 games, 2 goals scored, 9 conceded. Like you said, -7 goal differential. It's not looking good at all.
Yeah, not at all. I think you have to agree. I didn't realize they lost Fabio as well. So that's a big part. But I mean, just to piggyback on what you said, I think they've always been Wolves and Brighton of those teams have always been kind of those teams of the league though. So I don't think we can be too disappointed when you go back to think about all the players that are playing that night, right? We have the late Diego Dotto, I should say, some teammates, so rest in peace. And then we also have like Pedro Neto. There's a lot of good players that we can think about that came from Wolves. So I don't think for them getting players that are not necessarily established in the top league is a bad thing. I think not having a structure with obviously more experienced players because they used to have, also all those um, good players around in the club, not just like in the starting 11, but experienced player in the club. So I think starting brand new with a young and experienced team can be a little bit worrying, but that's pretty much what they're known for. I think, it's just a little bit concerning that they've lost the first couple games so far. But I think to go also back onto Fulham, it's still tough. I think for Leeds, if I was in Leeds' position, like obviously you said, you're not gonna drop your head because it's a last minute goal. I still think it's still tough, to take, those games where you're hanging on, especially for those points. I mean, we've all been there for supporting our team, whatever the point is for. It's important, whether you're trying to win or qualify for the Champions League in our situation. So you're trying to fight for those points and you lose to go in the last minute. It's one of those, the hardest thing to take. I think above all, good start so far. I think for Fulham, it's something that they feel like it deserved, right? Especially what happened in game week 3 against Chelsea. I think Marco Silva left that game feeling a little bit undeserved, and I could understand from like I said, a Chelsea point of view. So yeah, good win for Fulham and a good win for Newcastle as well, getting their new striker onto the score sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. That moves us to Spurs away to West Ham. 3-0 victory for Spurs and West Ham's what seemed like, maybe a revival starting with them beating Forest at Forest last match week, coming back home and losing 3-0 to Spurs. And while it is Spurs, I mean, it's a strange one. I watched this game, the first half at least, and I thought it was a really flat game. I definitely think that Spurs had sort of the upper hand, at least in the first half. It was a little bit back and forth, but I did not watch the second half. I kind of saw the score after 80 minutes or so, and I'm sure that the red card had something to do with kind of West Ham falling off. But losing 3-0 at home, sort of after the start that West Ham have had, it can't really be a good thing, right? But good victory for Spurs, I'd say. They're looking good. I feel like we've said this before, but Thomas Frank is a great manager, and I think that he's gonna get this team playing very well and very hard. And I think that that's sort of those two things have lacked in the past for Spurs, at least in the last couple years. It's been either one or the other. And as much as I hate to say it, I think that he'll be a great manager for them. I think that they have also a good defense, which is a good sort of base to that, right? The two center backs, Mickey and Romero, I think are decent center backs, right? I think they kind of complement each other very well, pace and physicality. Pedro Porro on the right, he's been there for a couple of years now, and he kind of gives a solid performance. And then Mr. Bring Me Your Favorite Winger playing left back, Jed Spence. I think he'll kind of be on a high from getting called up to the national team, and so I think they have a decent back line. And to be fair to them, I think that their back line struggled under Ange a lot just because of the height of that line. I think that they will look a lot better this year under Thomas Frank, because I don't foresee him sort of forcing the same height to that line as previously. Not to say that I don't think that they'll push up or that they're going to be in a low block or whatever, but I think that they'll be more sound just because his approach is a little bit different, right? He's not this all out, attack approach and all out pressuring approach. So 3-0 victory for Spurs. I think very good for them. West Ham, I know they got a red card, but you'd like to see them sort of give a little bit more of a game, especially in that second half. At least kind of maintain what they did in the first half. And again, I'm not really sure how the second half went. I didn't even see the red card challenge, so I don't even know how that looked. But I think disappointing from West Ham. And I think a good victory for Spurs.
Yeah, I agree. I think a good victory for Spurs overall, but I mean, I praise West Ham in game week 3, right? About how for them to look a bit more sound and defensive, and they got but not them on the break and won a game 3-0, and it was very comfortable. I think went to the same old West Ham pretty much in game week 4, right? I think the midfield is going to struggle. I know Graham Potter tried to change his back line a bit. He took Wan-Bissaka and Walker Peters, and honestly, I couldn't tell the difference. I think the team itself, I don't know if it's a manager or what the thing is, but West Ham for sure looks like they're going to struggle this season. I think my one concern would be with Spurs, with West Ham. This wasn't a good team on the day, but I'm reserving my thoughts until I see them play better teams. Obviously, that loss the other day to Bournemouth, it still shows that there's question mark there, but overall, I think a good win for Spurs. I watched the game myself, and I think Spurs looked impressive. I think Spurs have looked impressive, but I think that defeat the other day just put that, in me when they play the bigger teams, how would they look? I know they played Man City and won, but just when they play like, a more organized team, like will it be? Because I believe Bournemouth was very organized and they found it difficult. Saying that, there's also some players missing. So we will see.
And just to kind of piggyback a little bit off what you said with the West Ham midfield, Suchek and Ward-Prowse are their two sort of starting center midfielders, and I'll be honest with you, for a team that's looking to sort of be in like in and around the mid-table in the Premier League is what I think West Ham's aspirations are. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I don't think that midfield is good enough. I mean, Souček's been there for a number of years, and I think that he had some good spells, but I just don't think that he has the quality in terms of the pace and the physique to sort of maintain and run with these other teams' midfielders. I mean, same thing with Ward-Prowse. It's like, to me, it seems like if you want to have one of them in the game, you need to have a center midfielder that's more physical, more pacey, that can kind of complement the one or the other, right? And to me, it seems almost like they're the same sort of player. And I know that they have like different qualities and whatnot, but in terms of physicality, I think they're the same. I don't think that either one of them are physical enough to sort of run a midfield together or let alone by themselves. So I think that that's an area that West Ham will struggle in the future and the rest of the season. Also forward, I mean, I know that they brought in Callum Wilson over the summer from Newcastle, but he didn't start this game, and that could be for tactical reasons, right? That could be, trying to overload the midfield just because I'm sure Graham Potter recognizes, the strengths of his team and the weaknesses. But Jared Bowen is Jared Bowen, right? He's a good player, but I don't think that he can create by himself, right? Paquetá as well. Paquetá is a good player, but sort of playing as like that false nine in the game. I don't know. I mean, I look at their defense too, and like you said, they brought in Walker Peters for Wan-Bissaka, and nothing really looked different. I did like their left back, at least in the first half. Diouf, I think his name was. He looked like he could be a decent Premier League left back. And their center backs too. I mean, I don't think that they're the worst two center backs in the league, right? But I think that the midfield is really where this team struggles a lot, and kind of maintaining not necessarily a dominance, but even a pressure. Going back to the Chelsea game, Chelsea kind of just sliced right through them at will, right, whenever they wanted to. And in this game as well, I mean, the first half that I saw, when Spurs decided to go forward, they kind of went forward and got through the midfield very, very easily. That's one thing I think is going to be a struggle for West Ham, and it's going to be interesting to see what goes on the rest of the season there in terms of who the personnel there is. And I don't even know what their options are to kind of change that up. I don't even know if they have any options, but I definitely think that they need something. They need something to give in that midfield for sure.
Yeah, 100%. They look like they'll get ran through pretty much if they play, you know, any competent midfielder, any midfielder that's good enough to go against them. So I think for West Ham, obviously season is long and it's just started, but also showing positive in game week 3. So I guess we also have to reserve our thoughts to see how it goes for them, but definitely a worrying start if I was a West Ham fan at the moment, thinking about how it went. But yeah, a good win for Spurs. Spurs is becoming a solid team, yeah. We can both be obviously different fans from London, from Chelsea and Arsenal, but I think we can also, like you said, agree that with Thomas Frank, he's not the same as Ange. Whether we hate it or like it, Ange was, more expressive, which for some teams, I guess it allows space for you to attack and all of that. But now Thomas Frank is a little bit more, sound and well rounded. So we shall see. We should see how Spurs go. But I think overall a good start. If I was a Spurs fan at the moment, I'd be happy with the way they look and the way things are going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next game of that match week, and I think this was the final game of the day. Your Chelsea away to Brentford, 2-2 draw. I'm just gonna ask you your thoughts on this before I, even say anything, sort of gauge what you're thinking, how the game went, and what could have gone better, and what went wrong, if anything even went wrong.
I think on the start of the game, honestly, I think we struggled for the past couple seasons against low blocks. I think a lot of teams struggles. I don't think it's just Chelsea, but I think watching Chelsea day in, day out, I think we struggle. That's our main concern. Any Chelsea fan will tell you that. And from the start of the game, it was kind of, one of those where it's a low block team, well organized. Fred obviously took the lead. We equalized with Cole Palmer coming on, changed the game. But I think overall, the main takeaway from that game was we talked about, I don't know what match week that was, late the third match week when Liam Delap went down with the injury, right? I think we are a different team. I don't know if you pay attention much to Chelsea last season, we went through a patch where we looked a bit different. We started the season very well. Everyone called us title contenders, but then we went to a period where we were just a bit off. I mean, all the players were playing bad, but I think above all, we were missing Nicholas Jackson for like 2 months. And I don't think Joel Pedro is an out and out striker. And without a striker, against those, especially those low block teams to keep the back line occupied or something like that, keep them runs in behind, whatever the case might be. We looked a little bit flat. We played with Joel Pedro. I think after the game, listening to Maresca and stuff, he was saying that Joel told him that he was a bit injured before the game and such, so he also wasn't 100%. But I think we just looked like we missed a target man, against those low block teams. So above all, we didn't play. I don't think the best that we could play. Second half, we played a lot better than we did in the first half, which I think we always seem to do when we play horrible because of our manager. Not in a bad way, but because I think he always kind of figure things out at half times and try to fix it, which sometimes helped us, and it did help us in the second half here. But at no point in time were we ever in control, which is what we want to be as a team, And I think before we took the lead, it was 1-1, right? Or even 1-0 when Brentford were winning. They were time wasting a lot, and then we took it, we equalized. Cole Palmer, then we were pushing for we pushed them back and we were trying to go for the victory. And then when Caicedo scored, I think you saw the clip, we tried to time waste and stuff. So at no point in time did you ever feel in control from a Chelsea perspective. And I think, yeah, it was always a little bit shaky. Our defense, as we said, they're young boys still learning their craft. A lot of good players back there, but also a lot of inexperienced young players that still do naive stuff. So I think, yeah, even the way we conceded the throw into for the equalizer in the 90-minute plus four, I think could have been avoided. But again, we have also a young team to give them time. But I also respect to Brentford. I mean, they played in their way, they played in their style, and got the result that they wanted. I think the first goal, we can't discredit what a brilliant pass from Jordan Henderson. I don't know if you got a chance to check out the highlights, but I think one of the passes of the season so far. So, yeah, no shade on the way Brentford played. I think from their perspective, a well-deserved in the way they set up a well-deserved 2-2. And from our perspective, I think, like I said, we could have played better. I don't think we played in a way where we can say we should have won and we dominated in possession and all those other stuff. But in terms of creating chances, I think we could have played better.
Yeah, I agree with you kind of on everything, to be honest. I did watch this game. I just want to say first and foremost, I absolutely agree with you. That pass from Jordan Henderson was probably the pass of the season. I mean, the weight, the spot where the ball drops down, it just made it so easy for Sade. It just made it so easy for him to kind of just take it in his stride. And um, the finish, I think, was sort of, I don't wanna say a bit lucky, but I think it went through the legs, if I'm not mistaken, of the defender, or he beat the defender. I don't remember exactly how it was, but the ball was just magnificent. But besides that, I mean, I sort of agree with everything you said. I think at times I felt like Chelsea almost got, like, lost a little bit. I would have liked to see them sort of, like you said, put more of an emphasis on the game and in that first half and sort of take more control of it. And even though they had most of the possession and, like you said, Brentford in the low block and whatnot, but just kind of, mitigate those counterattacking sort of opportunities that Brentford was creating, right? But that will come, right? Like you said, young team. I think Chelsea has the youngest squad in the Premier League, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely a process, right? I think the game sort of changed in the second half, like you said. Chelsea looked a lot more direct, and I think, part of that is also getting Cole Palmer back in the game, right? One of the most dangerous players in the league, in my opinion. The guy just can't stop producing, right, when he's on the field. So I really enjoy watching him, and I think he kind of changed that game as soon as he went on. He opened it up, with some turns in the midfield, kind of moving through the different phases of play and breaking the lines a little bit better. But I'll be honest with you, I thought Chelsea nicked it when Caicedo scored. I thought, 5 minutes left, they got the 3 points in the bag. And I think I stepped away for a second and I came back and I saw that the game had finished 2-2, and I was honestly in disbelief. I was in shock, and I didn't really believe it because I just didn't see Brentford scoring, right? Actually, because they didn't really have much in terms of anything before Chelsea scored. It was all sort of Chelsea pressing, pressing, pressing. But I think overall, I want to say I think a fair result. I don't think it would have been sort of unfair if Chelsea had finished the game 2-1, in my opinion. I just think that, they were the better side in terms of the dominance in the game and the play and whatnot. But I think it's just some of those counterattacking moments where, your whole team is sort of pressed up and they just break and somehow, create, even if it's like a half chance or not even a half chance, but there's always danger in those types of things. And I remember watching Arsenal a few years ago, and it was a constant sort of worry in the back of your head is if we lose the ball in this position, how are we going to recover? Just because, to kind of get past these low blocks, you have to have players, you have to have bodies push up. And I don't think that Chelsea necessarily have a problem with that. I just think that it's something to just keep in mind when you are playing against these low blocks is understand their strengths, especially on the counter and their pace and whatnot. But like I said, I think probably a fair result. I did want to ask you, what did you make of Garnacho's debut? How did you think he fared? I know that was a big sort of talking point over the summer in terms of, him wanting out of United and United wanting him out. Um, what did you think of his performance, at least for, the short time that he was on the pitch?
Yeah, I think for every Chelsea fan right now, it was an okay performance from us. Obviously, we've been watching Gittins for the past couple match weeks. He just doesn't look ready at the moment. So I think Garnacho, we kind of like rest our hopes on Garnacho at the moment since we don't have another left side winger. But I think from the start, yeah, he was the one who made that dribble pretty much for Caicedo's goal. I don't know if he got the assist. I don't think he should have anyway because the defender kicked it. But yeah, I mean, he looked okay. I think from our point of view, from my point of view, I don't know much other Chelsea fans, but we had Jadon Sancho last season. It was a kind of the same thing. We heard about this disciplinary issues at Man United and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't have any worries like that, but just because I think you kind of, as a coach and as a club, you create that environment, right? If players come in and they're falling behind, and I don't think the coach alone, but I think other players will also get them in line. And I think at United, I think for some players we see after they leave, right? Like some of these players probably weren't. I wouldn't say necessarily that they weren't bad or a problem, but they just needed a change of environment, probably. Yeah, I'm excited to see what he has to offer. But from that little cameo that we saw, I think it was exciting. I think it was good. He was also the guy that let this guy far post to score the goals. Things to work on, obviously, but a more established player, you know, specifically in the Premier League than getting. So for us right now, we're just hoping that all of those things that happened in United's in the past and that it'll be good for us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Moving on to Sunday and some teams that, quite frankly, I think you and I both are not the biggest fans of. We'll start with the game at Turf Moor, Liverpool away to Burnley, a 1-0 victory for Liverpool, 90 plus 5 minute Salah penalty. Seems like we just can't get rid of these Salah penalties for Liverpool. But what was your take on this? I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to watch it. I did watch the whole game, and I definitely have some thoughts. But what are your thoughts?
Do you want Fantasy League team thoughts or do you want the podcast team thoughts?
How about how about we get both?
because fantasy elite Akeem thought it's a clean sheet and the points. I think when watching the game, like you said, right, as a Chelsea fan, to be fair with you, was kind of a little bit all over the place because I think always thinking in a way of, oh, we tied yesterday, so we can kind of relax and take ourselves out of the, the pressure of not saying that we are ever going to win the league, but it's nice to be up there. You know what I mean? It's nice to believe in your team. So I think I was watching the game from a sense of, don't know why, but I the feeling that Liverpool was going to win somehow, some way. I just think that they've shown that. For me, I've questioned my side for the past couple seasons of if they have that killer instincts. But I think every time I watch Liverpool, I don't know if it's a killer instinct because obviously it's a penalty. But yeah, I kind of had that feeling that they were going to win. So I don't know if I was as disappointed as you were. Obviously, with it being a penalty and it being so late in the game, I know that took away a lot of hearts and stuff. But from watching it, I'm interested to see how they go because, as you know, time will come where if the performance is not there, then it will get that will caught up to them. So it's interesting to see what happens, but I kind of had a feeling that Liverpool is going to win, however that happens.
I think honestly, even the most deluded people probably had that feeling as well. I went into this game expecting Liverpool to sort of coast through it, to be honest. Just given the firepower that Liverpool have and Burnley's status in the league, I think I expected Liverpool to just breeze right through this game. And watching the game, sort of, the opposite, right? I mean, it wasn't easy for Liverpool. It wasn't easy to break down Burnley, obviously, right? Because, it took a penalty in stoppage time to get on the score sheet. But I don't think Burnley really created anything, to be honest. So I don't think that there was ever a fear of Liverpool losing this game. I do think that Liverpool was a little bit hard done by. I think that the challenge early on in the game on, I believe it was McAllister, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that should have been a red card. I was shocked when I saw that it wasn't given as a red card. So I think that, Liverpool playing against a 10-man Burnley would have found a way earlier. But, credit to Burnley, they hung in there. They tried everything they could and they eventually did get a red card in the 84th minute and it was the second yellow. Justice was eventually served, I think, to what was it, Ugachukwu. So I think
Yeah,
eventually,
Leslie Ogochoko.
yes, I think eventually, they got the red card. Not much changed from the red card to the goal, to be honest. Liverpool pressed, found it difficult to find space, but Burnley, giving up and I don't just say this from an Arsenal fan perspective, but just a silly, silly PK. Cross coming in, no real imminent danger, right? You have bodies loaded in the box and you're at the top of the box, sort of the corner. The cross comes in and you turn your back and the ball hits your arm as you're turning your back. I mean, I absolutely thought it was a penalty. I didn't think there was anything against that, but I think it was Hannibal that gave it away. But to give that away as a manager, I'd find that extremely unacceptable. One, turning your back on the ball. I mean, let the ball hit you in the face, let it hit you anywhere. Why are you turning your back? And two, just giving away a penalty to Liverpool in the last minute after just giving away a penalty to Manchester United in the last minute to lose the game. I mean, I would be absolutely distraught if I was Scott Parker in terms of those two sort of specific incidents. But I thought Burnley, did what they could do, right? Low block, clearance after clearance, try and give as little space as possible to Liverpool. But in the end, I think, Liverpool just didn't give up and kept pressing and kept pressing. And really, that's all you can really do from that standpoint is, just keep trying and hope that something goes your way. And in this case, it did. So I think, obviously good 3 points for Liverpool. I think it's 3 points they would have expected to get before the game. Definitely taking it given the circumstances of the game and how it went. Eager to see sort of how they integrate Isak into the team. He wasn't even on the bench for this game, so I know some FPL guys were upset about that. But uh, I don't really know what else to say. I would say sort of same old Liverpool, but I don't think that this is a game that they deserve to lose or to draw, to be honest. And that sort of moves us to the Manchester derby, which I'm sure Manchester United fans are just, seething through their teeth. And I watched this whole game, I'll be honest with you. City was home, 3-0 victors on the night. Yeah, City deserved the victory. I don't think anyone would ever say anything other than that. But watching the game, the first half was a strange one. I mean, there was times where United pressed forward and, you almost thought that, they could get a goal here. And, the game sort of changes. I'm not going to say that, they would have won or that City wouldn't have ended up winning, but it was strange. I mean, it was just a strange game for me. I think eventually United just really fell apart bad. And then they had a couple chances that I felt that they should have scored at the end of the game. And I think part of that was City sort of, taking their foot off the gas, but just a strange game. We've talked about this with United. It's just so the same, right? Like, they have good periods. I don't want to say good periods, but they have decent periods where, you feel like a goal might be coming or they might be able to get one, and then they don't get a goal and it just turns around and they concede one or two. I don't know, man. I really don't know. I think the midfield is a big issue, playing two in midfield just so you can get numbers, going forward on the outsides and the 210s and whatnot. And I think when you're defending, when you're forced back sort of into a mid block or even a low block, that formation, if you don't get your three sort of attacking players back, it just leaves you so vulnerable just because you have so little bodies, right? And that's constantly happening with United. I don't know. I don't know that it's gonna change. I don't know that it's gonna get better, but obviously, people react to the game and it's a 3-0 result and they're losing the City and it's like crisis mode and it's talking about the manager and the philosophies and all that. But I think it's much more with United. I think it's deeper than the manager and it's deeper than the players. I think it's just, you kind of touched on this when you said, players leave United and they sort of change. And I think it's the culture and I think that's the reason why. I think the culture has developed into this culture of accepting, mediocrity. So, and I can kind of speak to this from experience because Arsenal at one point were like this too. And I'm sure you remember the days where, you know, we we'd play sort of decent football, right? Especially towards the end of Wenger, where, football wise, we played decent football, the one touch, the quick movement of the ball and whatnot. It seemed like there was no backbone in the team in terms of holding a league or protecting points or anything like that. And honestly, I don't think that culture really changed until Arteta came to the team and sort of really, put his emphasis in it. And that's not to say that I don't think Ruben Amorim is going to be that guy for United. I think that it's still sort of up for grabs where he could possibly still be that guy if he, goes that route and sort of puts his foot down in those types of situations. I don't think that he's done that yet. I think part of that methodology was getting rid of some of the players that were causing issues. And I think that, that's the first step. But now I think the second step is obviously expecting certain things from your team. And I just don't see it. It almost feels like no one from the pitch to the coaching staff to the back office and all that, no one really wants to take accountability for anything, right? I think one of the Holland goals, I mean, he was inside his own half, and the closest United defender was 5 to 10 yards away from him in the opposite direction. And they just played a ball in, and he's onside, and he runs through and he scores. And it's like, where's the organization? You know what I mean? Like, I know you're pushing for a goal, which happens a lot, and a lot of teams push for goals and concede, but to concede like that, from me in particular, if it was Arsenal, I'd find that extremely unacceptable. But I thought, honestly, City didn't impress me in the game. There was nothing then in that game that I was like, yeah, City looks solid. I think it's just United really looked that bad and made that many mistakes that, reflected in the scoreline. And it looks like, City kind of played them off the park, which I don't think was the case. I mean, United, if they would have put away a couple of chances in the game, it's a completely different game. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I'm not sure how you feel. I'm not even sure if you watched this game or not, but I definitely think that it wasn't sort of what it was made out to be after the game in terms of, this insane City performance where they're thrashing United. I don't think that happened. I think it was just, you know, United kind of shooting himself in the foot, making silly mistakes. Obviously City have the individual quality in terms of players to capitalize on those type of mistakes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like you said, City has the capability to punish those mistakes. And I mean, we have talked about obviously Man United's problem, right? That it goes deeper than 11 on the pitch and even those guys on the bench. But I think just to focus on the start of the season, right? I know, obviously, like we said, Man United has problems and it's going to take a lot more than, just simple things just to fix the problems that Man United have. But I think you still have to question the manager a bit because you have to ask yourself, I don't know, when you watch a full game, but under the sea, do you think a change of formation would be better for them? What's your perspective on that?
I'll be completely honest with you. I think 4-3-3 with the squad that he has, it's a completely different team. I still think that midfield lacks, a strong personality, but I think that it covers the team a lot better in terms of structure. I am 100% certain that he will not change the formation. I just, knowing him and his personality and who he is as a manager, it's not going to happen. I think he would rather lose 20 games this year than and keep fighting for this formation than him change the formation. And I think there's a famous Mourinho quote where he talks about it and he says something along the lines of, I can play a certain way and win, or I can, try and do a certain, play a certain way and lose. And he's like, if you don't change, then it's you, the manager, who is the idiot. And it's funny because I think, people are bringing that up a lot now. And there's a lot of managers in football right now who are really hard-headed in that regard, who will not change their style of play or their approach to a game. It's their way and they're going to die by it, right? But I absolutely agree with you. I mean, part of me wants to even question why United appointed Amorim in the first place, right? I mean, these people that are making these decisions at Manchester United obviously have to know this club and have to know the history of this club, and should look at a squad that they have and sort of pick what they feel is the best manager for the given squad. Obviously, they're going to come in and make changes to the squad, but you can't change 22 players in one summer, right? So I think you have to kind of play to the strengths of the squad. And I honestly don't feel Mourinho was the right manager for them. I think last year when they appointed him, I think that they should have just I think it was Van Nistelrooy that took over as the interim. I think they should have just let him play the season out. I mean, the season was already going terrible. I don't think they were ever going to relegate. So, what's worse than them finishing 15th, right? Let the caretaker manager play it out. You have a couple of weeks in the summer where, you have time to really sit down and you have the full context of the season and select a manager. I think that was a big mistake by the board. I don't think Manchester United fans will ever be happy with Ruben Amorim unless he, puts them in the top four this season. I think there's not going to be a single Manchester United fan that's going to say, yeah, I think this is the manager for us. And I don't believe he's going to be in the top four this season. So I don't know how long he's going to last there, in my honest opinion. And I hate to say this just because I feel like it's an easy thing to say, right? But I don't see this combination lasting too long with this team. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that Manchester United, can figure out a way to start getting results and get some points up. But I think they're just going to keep struggling like this. I don't think that this system and style of play and formation suits them. I don't think that it would ever suit them, regardless of who the manager is. Manchester United, for as long as you and I have watched them, have played sort of the same formation. And it's been kind of a trademark of United, right? Especially in our early days watching this league. I mean, back then United was a team, right? And they had this explosive style of, wingers, two strikers, just sort of end to end style of play. And I think that everyone sort of expects United to get back to that point and start winning again. And I don't see it happening. I mean, the system is not the right system. The players are not the right players. It seems like the backroom staff, the people that are signing the players, are not the right people. The people that are bringing in the managers are not the right people. I honestly don't don't know where the club is headed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think my thought on the game was the change of formation, right? Like, I'm just wondering, like, obviously we know, there's bad stuff going on at United, and like I said, it takes a lot to change them, right? And we know what United is and blah blah blah. But I think the thing is, do you think for a manager, like right now, I know, watching them, but they don't have the midfielders to play what he wants to play in midfield. So do you think like the change in formation would help them? I know you said the three would be perfect for them. I think I a little bit disagree with that, just because I still think they don't have that lone midfielder, in terms of like that one to leave by himself. Because when you think those two are probably going to be attacking, unless you're going to leave one kind of slightly next to him. But I think for him wanting to get the two in midfield, the 2-3-1 would probably be the best for him, where he can still, I don't know for now how United deemed Sesko. I just watched him and I just don't feel like, he's up to par. I'm sure he can be a good player, but I don't think for right now he's ready. So I think maybe try different stuff. But like you said, I don't know if Ruben is that kind of manager to change. And I think I fear for managers that are like that, whether it's Ruben or whoever it might be, uh, because I think the league will figure it out sooner or later. So I think it's okay to have your principles and stick by them, but you have to be able to adapt and, change things and also find different things. And I know United need lots of help, but I think watching that performance there, like you said, it wasn't a trashing, but at the same point, I think there's still question mark over the manager and him refusing not to because, you don't have the legs in midfield. So he's refusing not to change. And like you said, to get more attackers on the pitch, which is fine. But at the end of the day, game goes both ways, so you have to think about both sides of the games. I don't know. I just think in that game, it kind of sums up what's going on for United at the start of the season. I know it's a lot of United fans turning on him. So I could feel not necessarily turning, but I know it's unease for the United and the fan base at the moment. So I still think, like you said, yeah, lots of question mark at United, but I don't think Ruben just gets to get away with, necessarily just a pass because of whatever the situation might be. I still think he's been in the league long enough, not long enough, but and enough time to see. And he's made some signings this summer as well. Doesn't have the best signings in all his positions, but he's made some signings to try different things to see if it might work or not, which I think he's refusing at the moment.
Well, and that's sort of what doesn't make sense to me entirely is um you bring in new bodies and you're a manager, right? So you see these players week in and week out. I'm sure he will know better than anybody the capabilities of those players within his system from the training ground, right? And if your players are not enough, or they're not good enough, or they're not at the stage where they understand your system well enough, what does it say about you as a manager if you're not willing to adapt to fit your players into the system? Because I think, it's kind of like a yin and a yang thing, right? Where if you stick to your philosophy, eventually you're going to get all of the right players, and eventually you're going to get to a point where, your philosophy is being met. And I think Mikel Arteta is one of those kind of examples that we can go to. I mean, he was at Arsenal for a few years before he was able to completely turn over that squad and get a team playing how he wants them to play, right? And it was a difficult few years for Arsenal, but they eventually got to that point. I think the difference with United is they've changed so many managers in the last few years, and people just want an instant sort of impact. And I think that's like sort of the questions that you're asking in terms of like, should he change the formation and whatnot. I think the reason why you and probably a lot of other people sort of asked that and mentioned that is because of the turnover rate in that position and the amount of time it's been and all of that. I think people expect somebody to come in and just be the right guy for their job and instantly sort of maybe not change it, but just make it look different or make it look like it's promising, right? And I don't honestly don't think that's the case with any manager that's going to come in and manage that team, right? I think you have to get the right manager first, and you have to be fortunate enough to, maybe not fortunate enough, but you have to kind of do your due diligence and make sure it's the right manager to come in to take that team forward, which I think with Ten Hag probably wasn't the case, right? or maybe before he came in, all the boxes were checked, and it just didn't work out for him there. But with Ruben coming in, like I said, I don't see him changing his system. I think for him, his whole thing is, I need you to understand and learn my system, because my system for me is the best style of play, or the best style of play that I can influence. And I think that he's gonna die on that hill. I think that if it loses him the job, I think if it ends with him being sacked, I think he's still gonna stick with that. I don't see him changing.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one for him. Obviously, like you said, there's a lot of things to figure out at Man United, but I still think for the fans, I don't think the fans are asking for them to win the. Obviously, with a tough season ahead, I think they're only left in what, the FA Cup and the Premier League, right? So I don't think the fans are asking for them to win either of those competition at the moment. The fans are just asking for, I think, a bit of more hard work and stuff that they're just not seeing. They're not seeing a team that clicks right now at the moment, a team that's working for each other, a team looks at give them any confidence. So I can understand from an United perspective. And like I said, I think for Ruben, sooner or later, I think there will be, a judgment call for him. Whether or not Man United wants to make that, that's up to them. But I think if not, like I don't disregard what's going on beyond the starting 11 and the boys that are in the squad or whoever. I'm a fan. We understand. I think we all can be honest with ourselves when our team's not doing the best to say that they're not doing the best, but you kind of want to see a coach, especially nowadays, like a more structured coach that wants to put his best foot forward, especially, I mean, for United. They went through the season that they're having so far, losing to Grimsby. I think that was a perfect example for them. Grimsby showing them that, we're not scared or what the moment might be. I think Cameron coming out saying after that game, if you're a top team, you win that game 3 or 4-0. And I agree with them. I think every United fan is just looking for that right now. Even Grimsby or any team that's playing against them can feel as if, there's no fair to play against United. So, like I said, I don't think they're looking for the Premier League or to win the FA Cup. I just think they're looking for work and, a little bit more dedication from the team. And I think above all, when you look for that, it's to be something that comes on the manager, especially after having a transfer window in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, looking ahead for United, and this kind of takes us into sort of the next match week, but at home to Chelsea, another big game for them, right? I think that, another test and another game to see sort of how they can match up against, one of the better teams in the league. So I think that that will be an interesting game to see sort of the outcome of that, and just kind of looking ahead at some of the other fixtures, just some things that stand out to me. Obviously the Arsenal City game is a big game, but I'm interested in the Merseyside derby, interested to see what happens there given sort of Liverpool's first 4 games. I'm interested to see how they handle Everton. Brighton, Spurs too. I think Spurs losing away to Bournemouth kind of makes this game a little bit interesting, at least, for me, just to see how they can handle Brighton, especially, Spurs coming from, Champions League midweek, to, the Prem at the weekend. And to be honest, looking at the rest of the fixtures, another one that stands out for me in particular is Sunderland Villa. I think we both said Sunderland have had a decent start to the season considering they're a newly promoted side, and Villa have had a really crappy start to the season. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. Bournemouth, Newcastle too. I think that'll be a good, strong game to watch this weekend. Any thoughts on the weekend games or anything moving forward on your end?
Yeah, I'm interested. I know a lot of people are saying putting us favorite, but as a Chelsea fan, I'm interested to see what happens when we go to United on Saturday. I'm interested in the Liverpool game to Everton in the morning. Like you said, Everton is playing well. And always is a good team. Brighton Tottenham would be a good game. I think there's some good games on in match week 5. Leeds, Wolves. If Wolves are going to pick up some points here, then how much further can it go for Wolves from there? Obviously, with Fulham and Brentford, both have had a semi-decent start. So I think whoever can pick up 3 points here would be relatively happy in that game. And then we move into Sunday. Like you said, would be a good game on Sunday morning with 2 good managers. Bournemouth, Newcastle would be a top game for them. Sunderland, I'm interested because they're home. And considering Villa's form, I think it would be interesting the last game to end the weekend with Arsenal Man City. I don't know. That's always a cagey game. It's at the Emirates, so with the way Arsenal is playing at the moment, I can understand, not understand, but I can feel like I can see the way this game is going to go. Will still be interesting to see at the moment, because I think what will be the first time you'll have an Arsenal with what we can call like a target man now, So I guess there's different ways for them to set up, for Arteta to set up for that game. So that would be an interesting one. And it would be Victor versus Erling. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see the game, but I can already feel like, especially being a Chelsea fan, I know a lot of fans used to say, building up to these games, oh yeah, it's a big game, it's going to be an exciting one, but comes on Sunday, it's like a 1-0 or a 1-1. So I'm interested to see it. I hope that there's goals. I hope that it's exciting. We both know what's at stake for both teams. So interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think both teams will sort of, I think, have the same approach to that game, and I think City more so maybe even than Arsenal in terms of more caution, right? They're away. They've already lost a couple games this year, so they have title aspirations. Pep Guardiola and City, their history in the last few years in the league. For them not winning the league is a disappointment. So I think considering that, I anticipate Pep to be a little bit more cautious. And when I say cautious, I don't necessarily mean defensive, but I just mean picking and choosing sort of moments in games. And I think that Arsenal will just sort of be Arsenal, the Arsenal that we've seen. I don't think that they'll change too much, right? The way that they played Liverpool, it was sort of a pretty equal game, and I don't think that they were necessarily I don't think either time or either team, I should say, weren't necessarily overly cautious in the game, but they weren't, guns blazing, 11 players forward, it was a little bit more cautious. And I think that you're right. That's probably the way that this game is going to go as well. But nevertheless, I mean, I think it'll be an interesting game. I'm interested to see the games this match week. Any thoughts from you before we sign off for match week 4?
No, man, just excited to see the games. And yeah, thank you for joining us this week.
Absolutely. One thing before I let you go, I want a prediction for the United Chelsea game from you.
The United Chelsea game, 3-1 Chelsea.
All right, there we go. All right, we'll see you on match week 5. Thank you.
Thank you.